Hi, I'm Gautama Mehta, a reporter at Coda Story. I'm going to tell you the story of a really strange late-night Facebook post that the president of Brazil made a few months ago. So the background is, it's April and Jair Bolsonaro is at war with the country's health establishment, firing his health minister for publicly disagreeing with him, publicly railing against lockdowns, and coming under criticism from all sides. With all of this going on, he publishes this Facebook post attacking the World Health Organization, whose coronavirus recommendations he's been brazenly disregarding. The post is rambling and not quite coherent. In it, he asks why should he listen to the WHO on coronavirus when he claims their educational policy encourages young children to masturbate and have same-sex relations. He doesn't cite any sources, but this comes on the heels of another post by one of his advisors making similar claims. The sexualization of children has been a long-time hobby horse for the Brazilian far right, since long before Bolsonaro came to power. To understand why, I called up Mariama Correia, who's been reporting on this from Brazil.
É recurso que a direita sempre utiliza em momentos de enfraquecimento, em momentos de crise de governos. Ela tira esse discurso do combate à pedofilia, de acusar pessoas da esquerda de prática de pedofilia. Ele, inclusive, na eleição ainda, ele falou várias vezes uma informação que não é verdade, informação inverídica, sobre que a esquerda teria distribuído kits gays na escola, assim, para incentivar as crianças à prática da homossexualidade, enfim.
As strange as this all is, and Bolsonaro soon deleted the post about the WHO, at Coda Story we've actually seen this exact same narrative before, halfway around the world, in Russia. In 2016, my colleague Katya Patton reported on the homophobic narratives which were then gaining traction on Russian state media. One of these was the myth that schools in Europe were forcing children to masturbate, following guidelines encouraged by, once again, the World Health Organization.
So the anti-WHO masturbation myth has a lot of currency on Russian state television, and it's not just because of this kind of moral outrage factor. But the broadcasts obviously are quite ridiculous. In some cases, I've even seen newscasters apologize to their audiences before saying the word masturbation. But besides this kind of moral angle, I'm really surprised with how quickly, and I'm seeing this happen over the years, with how quickly the message changes from a moral one to a political argument. And that message is very clear-cut. It's an anti-EU, anti-NATO message meant to scare Russians from wanting to have anything to do with the EU.
В время, когда Владимир Путин в Москве говорил о приверженности России традиционным ценностям, на другом конце Европы, в Брюсселе, вовсю продавливали так называемые либеральные ценности. Депутаты Европарламента, увлеченно, не покладая рук, работали над тем, чем еще развратить европейские общества, а именно над новыми правилами сексуального воспитания подрастающего поколения. Смысл этих правил в том, чтобы еще до школы дети узнали об особенностях половых отношений, а к концу начальной школы приобрели навыки пользования презервативами.
In 2010, the WHO's European office published a 68-page report called Standards for Sexuality Education in Europe. This report does describe childhood sexuality as a normal part of development, as background info for developing sex ed curriculums. But it does not tell teachers to instruct children to masturbate or to engage in same-sex relations. Nevertheless, this narrative really took off in Russia and spread from there to Armenia, Georgia, and the Baltic states. We've seen versions of the same story crop up elsewhere too. An article went viral on Mexican social media, falsely claiming that the WHO considers pedophilia normal. What's interesting to me about the recurrence of this myth around the world is how different the motivations are for its usage. In Russia, it emerged as a piece of useful propaganda in service of anti-EU and anti-NATO sentiments. In Brazil, it's being used to discredit the scientific establishment during the coronavirus pandemic. Because the cultural taboos around childhood sexuality and sex education are so deeply embedded, it's easy for politicians to weaponize them against enemies of their choice. This explains how something as innocuous as this obscure sex ed curriculum can keep coming up in such varying contexts. As political figures weaponize parents' anxieties about their children against health policy, we at Coda Story are on the case, keeping up with the latest trends in disinformation and the war on science. So stay on the story with us.